Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey, what's happening? I'm just getting going on this webinar for race day bike setup. I'm going to be focusing on practical and affordable options because let's face it, if you have the money to go to a wind tunnel and do all of that stuff, then you probably don't need to watch this webinar. So this is kind of more focusing on very simple ways you can set yourself up to be very fast on race day, or I should say to have your bike slow you down as little as possible on race day. That's kind of the goal. So I am Doug Maclean, as the slide says, and I've been coaching for a QT2 for about 9 years now. So let's get to it. Okay, so I'm going to go over 4 main topics: body position, clothing gear selection, components, and nutrition placement. These 2 are by far the most important. These 2, while also being important, less so. And this is in terms of bang for your buck. This is going to be the best bang for your buck. Number 2, number 3, and number 4, generally. Barring the extreme, of course. So moving on. So body position. This is far and away the most important factor in terms of setting up your bike to go fast on race day. And I should note, I'm not necessarily really getting too much into the specifics of bike fit as far as, what should your knee angle be? What should your elbow angle be? This is more about how you set up your bike once you have a decent fit, or maybe for the body position part, where you want to start aiming your bike fit when you talk to a bike fitter or when you're like monkeying around with your fit at home. Because that's really how I arrived at my position on the bike. I go in for a position check every 3 or 4 years, that kind of a thing, or when I get a new bike. But then when I get home, I'm doing endless tinkering. Like, I think I can do this. I think I get my elbows closer. I can get, So anyways, as it says here, the body is about 70% of the aerodynamic drag when you're riding on a bike. This of course is going to depend on the size of the body, the exact details of the bike frame, the direction of the wind, the strength of the wind, the terrain, the uphill, the downhill, all that kind of stuff. So, we're just saying 70% is kind of a good rough estimate. Point being, the real takeaway here is what you do with your body is a heck of a lot more important than what frame you're riding. That's really what I want to drive home with this point. Does the frame matter? Sure, of course it does. But your body matters a heck of a lot more. And you know what? It's a lot cheaper to move your body position than it is to buy a whole new dang frame, right? So just some basic rules here. You want to get your back as flat as you actually can. As you can hold for 112 miles or 56 miles or whatever your target race distance may be. And all that's doing is obviously just lowering the cross-sectional area that your body is presenting to the wind. And that's what it comes down to. That's a lot of what the drag is being determined by, is the cross-sectional area that you're presenting to the wind. And so the flatter you get, the more you're reducing that area. So as you can see here, this is my position. I was able to get pretty flat back. There are a couple people, Sebastian Kienle comes to mind, who actually will have his back sloping forward or sloping down, which is like hyper extreme aero. I never felt safe in that position, so I never went there because I felt like it kind of guided my eyes too much down towards the road, and it was just too hard to look ahead. If you can do that and still look ahead, like, great, knock yourself out. I just wouldn't recommend it. Now, that said, not everybody can, safely and comfortably ride with their back this flat. So what you want to do is you want to approach it in a gradual, systematic manner, and then also, gradual, systematic manner in terms of bike adjustments, and then also kind of a systematic manner in terms of improving flexibility, because your ability to hold this is large from a body perspective is largely going to come down to glute flexibility, lower back flexibility, hamstring flexibility, and ability to resist shoulder fatigue. Because, you are putting a significant amount of load right there. On that note, if you go to the wind tunnel, you will often see results saying, the so-called Superman position is faster. And for those of you who don't know, the Superman position is you can get even flatter than this, kind of by extending your arms out in front of you. And so your elbows, instead of being at a 90-degree angle, they're more at like an obtuse angle. They're much more opened up. It's going to be more like the elbows to come down and that. And so you can see how, essentially pushing your elbows forward would allow you to get your upper body lower. Now, the downside of that is while aerodynamically it is faster, it's incredibly hard and stressful to sustain for anything more than like, say, a 20K time trial or maybe a 40K time trial. Because what you're doing is you're placing tremendous stress on the shoulders and the rib cage in order to be able to maintain that position. So while you are giving up a little bit of aero by having your elbows underneath your shoulders, I think you're gaining that back because you're making holding this position a lot more passive. Because instead of supporting it with the ligaments and tendons and muscles in your rib cage, you're really just using your humerus here kind of as a support structure, as a load-bearing structure. That's what your humerus becomes. And it's just a lot easier to hold the position. Okay, back to the systematic lowering. So what you see right here in this position I have about 18 centimeters of drop. Now that didn't just happen overnight, right? It's one of those things, and when I talk about drop, I'm talking about height of the tip of the saddle to the top of the elbow pads. It's one of those things. I started out at maybe 8 or 10 centimeters of drop, ride like that for a month, work on flexibility. Then I go to 12 centimeters of drop, ride like that for a month, work on flexibility, go to 14 centimeters. You get the idea. Next thing you know, you start that in November. By the time you hit racing season, you're already nice and low and you're adjusted. Your body isn't shocked and things work out really nicely. As far as elbow placement, you want to get them as tight as you can without causing severe discomfort. Now, the downside is the tighter you bring your elbows, the more strain it's going to place on your deltoids to hold the position. But if you can do that and you can adjust to it, you can make some real aero gains just by snugging in your elbows tighter. And what I used as a reference, I would just always try to pinch my aero bottle with my elbows, and that tended to work out pretty well. Now, hands up versus flat, that's another body position issue. I'll go down to here. So as you can see, the two people who were just first off the bike in Kona 4 days ago, we got Jan Frodeno and Lucy Charles, right? They're both mega badasses. And Jan obviously rides with the flat arm position, whereas Lucy rides with more of, what's commonly referred to as a praying mantis position. It's not a full praying mantis like you would see with maybe a Jocelyn McCauley. She goes full on praying mantis if you just Google her. But, you can see it's trending in that area. Now, and the reason for this, a lot of people have tested really well in the wind tunnel with their hands held high. But it's very individual, and I have no idea how to predict it. As far as I know, nobody really knows how to predict it. It's one of those things where you just got to get in the wind tunnel and test it out. And I can guarantee you Jan Frodeno has been to the wind tunnel. That dude does not cut corners. And he probably just found out that this flat hand position was faster for him. Just like Lucy Charles has definitely been to a wind tunnel, and she found out that this raised hand position was faster for her. Point being, there's no universal rule. So what I would recommend you do is, one, because it's kind of a crapshoot anyways, base your decision on comfort. I just have, as you can see, I have a bit of raised hands here. I'm just more comfortable with my arms raised. I feel like I can relax better. Now, comfort, you can do some kind of aero field testing on your own, get out on a flat road, ride the same stretch over and over at the same power, with the same position, with the only thing you're changing your hand height. Of course, when you measure your speed, of course, the downside there is if there's any shift in wind conditions, which, let's face it, there's going to be, that's going to potentially throw off the results of your testing. So what I would recommend is maybe ride with hands flat for a month, ride with hands up for a month, and just kind of see what one you like better and go with that. Absent wind tunnel testing, that's about the best you're going to do. Now, I just bring up this slide because I see this triathletes do this all the time. Now, what is this guy doing wrong? It's very obvious. Is that a woman? I don't know. What is this person doing wrong? They have all this super expensive gear. They got the zip disc. They got the Orbea TT frame. They got the $200 aero helmet. Now, this photo is probably from 7 or 8 years ago. But they're just throwing it all away with this ridiculous body position. Look at that. Their body is like a scoop, just sucking up air. And it's so crazy to me when I see people spend $5,000 on a setup and then make it completely irrelevant by sitting up like this. Now, of course, this person may have some sort of injury which forces them to do that. And I don't mean to pick on this person like as an individual. I'm sure he or she is a wonderful person with a wonderful family and all of that. But barring some sort of injury or medical condition, this position is preposterous. And I know a lot of you out there are riding just like this. But I got to tell you, you're making the rest of your investment here just a huge waste of money if you're going to ride like this. You might as well just be on a road bike, honestly, because that's going to give you the same body position. So moving on. Number 2, clothing selection. So as you can see here, we have Rachel Joyce. This is a photo from Kona a few years ago, and she is extremely fast. So I'm like, maybe she knows what she's doing. And you know what? She does. First thing we notice here is the full-on sleeved racing kit. And this generally has been shown in tunnel testing across the board to be faster than a tank top or a sleeveless kit. And this is generally due to the fact, I think it has to do with when you have a sleeved kit, the seams are maybe less pronounced at the shoulder. And then also the material just happens to be aerodynamically faster than skin is. So if you cover it up, you can slip through the wind a little bit quicker. Now, of course, the downside is, and another upside of this is you get enhanced sun protection. Of course, the downside is you are going to retain a bit more heat, because you have more skin covered. And so that's a trade-off. Like if you're comfortable in those conditions in a sleeved kit, then go for it. I've never found a race that was too hot for a sleeve kit on the bike. I have found races that are too hot for sleeve kits on the run. But not on the bike because you do get a good amount of evaporative cooling on the bike. So I would say, unless you have a good reason not to go sleeved, go ahead and ride sleeved. Now, it is important to note that sucker's got to fit tight because if you have a whole bunch of wrinkles, a whole bunch of seams, all this kind of, if it's baggy, all the benefit just goes away if you have stuff flapping in the wind. It's got to be tight. It's got to be sleek. There's a lot of companies that make good stuff. Wadi obviously makes great stuff. They would be top of the list. Castelli makes good stuff. I'm just naming stuff off the top of my head. But there's several companies. But our team gear that Wadi makes it's as good as anything out there. So I think you're fine riding with it. Helmets are individual. One thing you want to do is match it up to your riding style. As you can see here, Rachel has kind of a head forward position. Head lifted, if you want to call it that way. So she can get away with this longer tail helmet that mates up really well with her upper back. You see that? There's really smooth airflow. There's no brakes. And so this is a really nice helmet selection by her. As you can see back and Jan, he kind of has that nice mating right there. Lucy, I suspect her head is a little bit down a little bit more. And she maybe wanted a little bit better venting, which is why she goes snub nose here. It looks like the Garneau P09. I'm not totally sure though. But again, see that still matches up really well. There's no breaks there. You see with my head position, I tend to look at the ground a little bit more, which is why especially if it's hot, I would tend to go with the Giro Air Attack because there's just not as much penalty for me pointing my head at the ground because I don't have this tremendous cone sticking up in the air. So again, it's individual. Some companies, one helmet that tends to test very well across the board now and is very trendy is that Giro Arrowhead. So you probably can't go wrong with that. But there are some helmets. I remember a notorious one was the Rudy. That was, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago that everyone was wearing. I forget what it was called. Like the wing or something, wingspan. I don't know. Some people it was great on. Other people it was costing them like 20 watts. They were finding this in the wind tunnel. So again, it's so individual based on your head position. But I would say because there are a lot of good helmets out there, I've had good luck with the Giro Air Attack and the Garneau P09. The P09 and the Giro Arrowhead, they tend to test well for just about everybody. So, if you're unsure about your helmet choice, go ahead and maybe look at those. But if you're happy with your helmet choice, and just go ahead and stick with it. Now, one thing to note on venting, uh, speed and cooling are kind of working counter to each other here. The more vents your helmet has, the better cooling it has, but also the less aerodynamic it is. So it kind of becomes this trade-off game, especially when you're racing. If you're racing in cool conditions, it's like 60 degrees on the bike, go ahead, wear something with no vents on it. Like body heat is not an issue. You just want maximum aero in air temperatures like that. If you're racing and it's like Kona, it's 90 degrees, maybe you're going to want to trade off some of that aero so you can get some better venting. A lot of helmets do have removable vent covers, and that can be a really good option so that you don't go around buying 6 different helmets. You just buy one helmet and then you either slap the vent covers on if it's cold out or you take them off if it's hot out. And that's a pretty good way to go. Now, one thing I will pick on Rachel for here is her shoe choice. You can see maybe it's a little bit hard to see, but you can see it's got these buckles and straps, and those surprisingly are an aerodynamic nightmare. But it kind of makes sense if you think about it. Like they're hitting the wind face on, and you're cycling them around. So shoe covers do work if you need graphics on that. I've worn them. I don't think I have any. I probably have pictures, but just look up TJ Tolixon's Instagram account. Basically, every race he's wearing shoe covers, and there is no one as tuned into aerodynamics as TJ is. And he is gonna, if he's gonna do something, it's probably a good idea, honestly. And he does that. There's a reason you see every time trialist at the Tour de France wearing shoe covers. It is absolutely worth the 20 extra seconds it takes you in T1. Those shoes covers are going to save you a good 10, 15, 20 watts. Maybe 20 is extreme. Maybe 10 watts compared to a regular shoe like this. Absolutely worth it. There also is a company called Bont, and you can see Jan is wearing them here. They kind of have a flap over all the buckles and stuff like that, and that's just as good as any shoe cover. What's also been really popular is there are some of the lace-up cycling shoes. I should have taken a picture of mine, but I didn't. Those test really well aerodynamically, and a lot of people have had good luck taking the lace-up shoes, and they'll just put yanks or elastic laces on them, and those lay flat, and that's an aerodynamic option. I took it one step further, and I actually took my lace-up shoes, ripped out the eyelets, took it to a tailor, and had them stitch in a zipper. Now, of course, the problem there is that zipper better be at exactly the right width. Otherwise, the shoes are just going to be uncomfortable. So that's kind of maybe not the smartest financial option. But, just stuff to think about. I would recommend just getting a set of $30 shoe covers and bang, there you go. Visor or sunglasses, again, it depends. Visors often test better in the wind tunnel. That said, there is a cooling penalty as they can trap air in there. And I don't like them because I found that they often fog up. And if my sunglasses just don't fog up as much. So I'm willing to take that slight aero penalty because I think in all other areas, sunglasses perform better. But that's just my personal preference. I'm not going to tell anybody that they're right or wrong either way. It just comes down to what they want to do. All right, now the third most important aspect I would say here is components. And this is the stuff that the bike companies want you to buy because this is how the bike companies make money, right? So the most important thing you can do is clean your dang chain before a race. A dirty chain, legit, can cost you up to 20 watts. Can you imagine how much training you have to do to get 20 watts faster on race day? It's like 2 years of just riding the trainer every day. Or you can just clean your dang chain. Like, come on, give me a break. It's an easy choice. If you're super lazy, you can go out and buy a new chain. And then just get your new chain on. That's honestly what I tend to do. Is I'll put a chain on before a race, ride it at the race, and then I'll just keep riding it until my next race, and then I'll slap another new chain on. That's an easy way to make sure it's nice and clean. The one thing you do want to do, you do still want to rub off the factory lube that comes pre-installed on the chain. One option is it's not that expensive. You can go to Iced Friction or Ceramic Speed. Then send them $150, and they'll mail you a Dura Ace chain with paraffin wax on it. And considering a new Dura Ace chain is maybe $70 or $80, it's not it's not crazy. It's just it can get expensive. I've done that a few times and it's great, but it doesn't last long, and yeah, it gets expensive. I think the best option you can do is there are a lot of good lubes out there. The best one tends to be Rock and Roll Extreme. You just clean off your chain and put some Rock and Roll Extreme on there. It tests only about half a watt slower than paraffin wax, and it is hundreds of times cheaper. Per application of paraffin wax, you're looking at $150. Per application of Rock and Roll Extreme, you're looking at, I don't know, 25 cents worth of oil, something like that, right? So that's how I would go with. On the topic of wheels, a rear disc is going to be faster on most Ironman courses, and it's going to be even better in extremely windy conditions. That's where discs really shine. Like if you're on a flat course, with a lot of crosswinds or headwinds or something like that, a disc is going to give you a tremendous advantage over a spoked wheel. You're only really going to get to a break-even point on say like a deep rear carbon versus a disc on a truly hilly mountainous course, say something like a Lake Placid or a Lanzarote or a Nice, or courses like that. But if you're looking at courses with 60 feet per mile of climbing or more, then okay, the weight savings of a deep carbon rear are probably going to outweigh the disc. But anything more moderate, say like an Arizona, obviously a Florida, a Louisville, a Chattanooga, you're going to be a little bit quicker with a disc. That said, it's not a tremendous difference. So if you don't have a disc and you don't want to spend the money on it, don't think that like you just can't win anything without a disc. Plenty of people win races not on discs. Like we're talking, a nice deep dish aerodynamic rear wheel versus a disc. I don't know, making up a number here off my head, 30 seconds over an Ironman. We're not talking big time gaps here. Another option is, this is me racing, I want to say Coeur d'Alene 9 or 10 years ago. But this is what I did. I had a Zip 808 rear, and I bought this disc cover. It's a plastic disc cover from wheelbuilder.com. And it makes your wheel pretty much as aerodynamic as a disc, and it costs like $75 or something. You just tell them your hub size and your rim depth, and they make one and mail it to you. It's literally just two pieces of plastic that you clamp them on over your wheel. It takes 3 minutes to take on and off, and I think that's a really worthwhile investment if you don't want to spend that chunk of change on a disc. As we get into tire pressure, this is kind of an often ignored area, but a lot of rolling resistance testing that's come out lately has shown there's this almost sharp spike in rolling resistance, and we're talking significant gaps here, like several watts, once you go beyond a certain tire pressure. And it's generally around 110, 115 psi. When you go over that, 110 or 115, if you're on a perfectly smooth track, Sure, jack those suckers up to 130. But if you're on any sort of road with just pebbles or chip seal or cracks or anything like that, uh, that rolling resistance skyrockets when you get above 110 psi. And the rougher the road, the lower you want the pressure. So really a good spot to go is probably around 95 to 100 psi. And if you're in doubt, err on the side of being lower. Um, like I'd rather race at 85 than 110. I think that's gonna at the end of the day, that's going to end up in lower rolling resistance. No, that doesn't mean go down to like 70 psi because that's like dang riding on flats. It's within reason. Um, but really, yeah, that kind of 85 to 105 range, 90 to 110, right in there. That's about where you want to be. Tire selection does matter. The tires you want to train on, the super durable ones that you can just slap on and they're not going to go flat all summer, they're not the ones you want to race on. What kind of a good loose guide is you just look at your threads per inch, and the higher thread count that in your tire, it's going to mean there's more threads and less rubber, and so that's going to end up being faster. But on the flip side, there's less rubber, it's less bulky, it's going to be less durable. So yeah, go ahead and train in your specialized armadillos, your Conti gator skins, something like that. But on race day, go ahead and flip it because you gotta consider most race courses are going to be swept. They're not going to be covered with nails and stuff like that. Like, are there risks of flat? Of course. But I've been running very thin racing tires for uh, really the last 8 or 9 years, and I've only flatted twice. Um, and once it was because I was going 30 miles an hour downhill and hit a giant like ledge slash crack in the road. Like there was no tire in the world that could have resisted that flat. So I think it's worth it. Now that said, make sure you know how to change a tire. Just saying it doesn't happen very often is not a good excuse because when it does happen, if it takes you 20 minutes to change a tire, you're going to be regretting that. But if you just change your tires, every time you swap out tires on your bike for racing tires, there's a chance to practice changing. If you just flat during training or flat on the trainer or whatever, there's a chance to practice changing your tires. If it's a regular old clincher, you should be able to swap that, take it off, put on a new one, inflate it, and be rolling again within 3 minutes. I think that's a pretty fair guideline. And here I just have some kind of generally good tires. This doesn't mean they're the only ones. They were just at the top of my head. Continental 4,000 gram pre, Schwalbe Pro 1, Specialized Turbo. They're all really good tires. There's plenty more. I just didn't list all of them. It's fine. You do want to generally match tire width to rim width. This is just going to give you smoother airflow over that surface. Latex tubes can be used. They are proven to roll faster than butyl. The trade-off is they are very finicky. I used them for a couple seasons, but then I just gave up on them because I was sick of getting flats in transition on race morning when I pumped them up. Like I'd ride them all race week and they were fine. And then I put air in them on race morning and they explode. This happened to me twice. And I was like, you know what? Enough of this. I'm going back to butyl. I don't care if I give up a watt. I just want to know my tires are not going to explode on race morning. That said, again, personal preference. If you're comfortable with latex, go ahead. The fastest thing going right now are tubeless. And what these are, it's like your car tires essentially. They fit on the rim and they hook so well that they don't need a tube because they're airtight. The upside here is they are fast. The downside is, and they're also more flat resistant because you're not going to get pinch flats because there's no tube to pinch. The downside is they are a nightmare to change. I dabbled with tubeless for a minute, but I gave up on them because I was sick of it taking 25 minutes to change tires. And the reason they're like that is because the fit has to be so tight to be airtight. Again, that was a situation where I said, you know what, I'll give up a couple watts if it means when I do flat, I can actually change it out and I don't have to drop out of the race. People do have good luck with sealants with the tubeless tires, so that may be an area you want to explore. I just didn't really want to mess with it. And I've heard many, many reports about people, they get a puncture, the sealant automatically fills it, and they don't even know that they flatted until after the race, and they just see like a little bit of sealant on their tire, and they're like, oh, hey, guess I flatted. So that is, that's very much a viable solution. It's just not a route I chose to go down. But if you're comfortable with it, go for it. You'll gain a little bit of speed. Okay, here we go. Nutrition storage. This is probably the simplest thing, I would say. It's also the last thing. Get a bento box. Right here, you'll see my setup. You'll see it's exactly the same as Lucy and Jan had on theirs. I do not understand why anybody would do anything other than this setup, but hey, it's just a bottle between the arms, a bottle behind the saddle, and then an aero bottle on the down tube with gels in it. There is zero aerodynamic penalty, I guess, except for that straw sticking up, to how I have my nutrition set up here. It is adding 0 grams of drag to my ride. And I generally actually don't ride with this. I prefer to take the Gatorade bottles and just jam them in there. I'm not sure. I was just trying something else for this race because I was like, whatever, I'll give it a shot. Sounds fun. But I've gone back to just taking bottles and swapping them out. I don't see, and I've raced in every type of weather that you can imagine. I've raced in races that are significantly hotter than Kona, and carrying 2 bottles has always been enough, and I have a pretty decent sweat rate. I go about 40 to 45 ounces an hour on my sweat rate. But you got to remember there's a floating buffet every 10 or 11 miles, and if you're not going to put down 2 full bottles in 11 miles. So just grab a couple at the aid station, drink what you drink. Say you drink a bottle and a half in that 11 miles, then just swap it out. It's super easy. You just swap out 1 bottle, and then you have a bottle and a half left to get you to the next aid station. And you just keep cycling through like that. There's no reason to carry 3, 4, 5 bottles. Just go with this. There's 0 aero penalty. And then down here, I don't even know who makes that. X Labs, I think. Yeah, X Labs makes good stuff. As you can see here, I have that paraffin wax chain. Pretty cool. And the sleeved race kit. Anyways, put as many gels as you can in your bento box and blocks, but don't put all of them in there. I can get, depending on the consistency of the gel, just put them in here and mix it up with water, shake it up, and then you've got most of your gels for the day right there. Depending on the consistency, you can get anywhere from 4 to 8 gels in there. The thinner gels, you can get 7 or 8, shake them up with water, and it's good to go. The thicker gels, like say a Cliff, you're really only going to be able to mix up 4, 5 if you're feeling daring, because they just don't mix with water as well. They're a bit more viscous. Oh, and one other thing I should note, you can kind of see my... No, forget it. I hadn't gotten the fancy front brake yet, but Tri-Rig makes a nice front brake. That's it depends if you want to buy it or not. It's about 100. I don't know what it's retailing for now. Maybe I want to say 150 bucks. But other racing photos, I have it on there. I guess I just hadn't bought it yet. But anyways, it's essentially just a regular old rim brake with an aerodynamic cover over it, so it'll save you a watt or two. If you're super into marginal gains, And as far as flat kit goes, so what I have going on here is I have my tube shoved under my saddle, my CO2 inflator and tire levers in here, and then 1 or 2, I think I have 1 CO2 jammed under the saddle and 1 more CO2 in there. And that's that's good, 0 aerodynamic penalty to having the flat kit. Now this is my older frame. This is the older model of the PR6. On the newer PR6 that has the, you see how Lucy's bike here has this storage box on the back? The newer PR6, which I'm riding now, also has that same storage box, and I just put my flat kit in there now, and again, carrying it, 0 aero penalty. It's the way to go. Um, and that's really it. It's pretty straightforward if you just kind of cut through the BS and minimize what you're showing to the wind. Some overall things to remember: aero is generally more important than weight. Not all the time, but overall it is. On most, if you're not doing Alpe d'Huez triathlon, aero is going to be the most important thing you got going on. That's not to say you should ignore weight. Weight is not meaningless. I'm just saying if you're forced into trade-offs of aero versus weight, lean on the side of aero. Only carry enough fluids to get from one aid station to the next. They're there. Use them, Sexy frames are sexy and they can be fast, but you're just flushing your money down the toilet if you set them up poorly or if you spend half the race sitting up. The whole point of that sexy aero frame is to get you in an aerodynamic position. The frame in and of itself isn't doing a whole lot of the heavy lifting. It's about where it places your body. So get down in that dang aero position and take advantage of it. General rule, the less you have sticking out into the wind, the better. Leading edges are the most important thing, but trailing edges matter too. So pay attention to them. Don't just have a sloppy back end. And you don't have to spend a ton of money, and that's kind of what I wanted to emphasize in this presentation. You can, on Slow Twitch, there was just a nice article about this guy, Kenneth Peterson. He's just, a pretty good pro out of Boulder. And it showed him he had a $2,000 setup, and it got him to Kona in the pro field, Point being, a lot of the bells and whistles on an $8,500 setup, they're nice, but they aren't necessarily making you faster. Like SRAM ETAP is freaking cool as hell, but it's not necessarily any faster than mechanical. Maybe you cut down the aero of the cabling because it's not there, but it's heavier than mechanical. So it's like, But anyways, that's just one example. Another example is you can take just a regular old wheel and slap that aero cover on it that I was talking about for $150. You don't have to get the wax chain. You just get the Rock and Roll Extreme. You can do a lot of the bike fit adjustments on your own, especially now with a lot of these newer bikes have integrated stems that are really adjustable. And if you don't, you can just go to the local bike shop, say, hey, I want to try out a few stems. They'll let you try them, take them on, take them off, and see how low you can get on your drop, things like that. You don't have to spend $8,000 to get a fast bike. You can get a really fast bike for $2,500. And if you have questions on how to do that, do not feel afraid to ask me or your coach. So anyways, that's that. I will open it up to questions now if anybody has any. I think you can type them in. Oh, tubulars. There is a question. Yeah, tubulars tend to roll a bit better. I shy away from them just because they're expensive and I don't like messing with glue. But that's just personal preference. I don't think they're bad. They're great. If you like them, ride them. Plenty of really fast people ride them. I just don't like figuring out a way to carry an entire extra tire on race day. And as I said, I don't really like messing with the glue. So yeah, that's kind of what it comes down to. But they are fast, so if you love them, go ahead, knock yourself out. All right, I think we just have one question. Are there any others? Going once. Going twice. That is it. All right, well, thanks for tuning in. And if you have anything you think of, you want to ask me, I'm at Doug at QT2systems.com, DOUG at QT2systems.com. And there's plenty of other people you could talk to that we work with also. All right, thanks. Bye.